Hello, it's an honour to present this workshop to you today. This workshop is about how every day can be a design thinking day for you and your students, and how digital platforms can support the thinking of the students to creatively problem solve and support you in guiding those students on how to incorporate STEM thinking or STEAM skills into the design thinking process. So who am I? My name is Linda Parsons. I am the digital lead at Ideate International School. In the 4 years that I've been in Ideate International School, it's been a pleasure to support and elevate learning by using digital platforms. I'm a Microsoft specialist. I got my Microsoft fellowship this year. I've also got a Microsoft, I'm a Microsoft trainer as well. So I'm really into helping like other teachers in their specialists in their specialist departments in primary and in secondary school. Before that, I was a Google certified educator in a previous school, and I tweet under the name Digilin, all things digital strategy and ways to kind of help your students learn. So I work really closely with a lady called Laura Henderson. She is our STEAM lead in our school. And she tweets under Miss L Henderson. So any activities, any specialist activities that you will see demonstrated today and I will talk about today actually come from her. What I'm going to be concentrating on is how the digital platforms can help elevate design thinking in your subject, so therefore elevate STEM or STEAM skills. So what's the difference between a STEM skill, or if you are in the Middle Eastern region, a STEAM skill, and the design thinking process? So traditionally, you have the 5 subjects: science, technology, engineering, arts and maths. And we say to our students that by the time you graduate from your chosen subject at university, you will have these set skills. So you must practice them at school. So we have a whole host of STEAM days or STEM days. And when we're going through like maths and science, like, you know, we say to them, well, you have to critically analyze and you have to have numerical literacy in math. And maybe like if you're going through art, then like, you know, there's a creativity link and so on. STEM skills are supposed to be skills that you use pretty much every day in order to solve problems creatively. And the way that we have approached STEAM thinking within a school unwittingly or unintentionally pigeonholes these skills into the subjects that they're headed. So if you're a scientist, then you've got lots of critical analysis and you can like work in a team and you can communicate. Well, the communication thread, you know, when you learn, you communicate. So that's the one that's the one that's the same in every single one. But if you're in technology, then you've got the problem solving element. If you're in art, then you're obviously going to be creative. Okay, but like what actually happens in real life is that you cannot have science without the creativity element, you cannot have maths without the problem solving element, and so on. So what design thinking does is it incorporates all of these skills into a process, and that process is repeatable in every single subject. And because it's repeatable in every single subject, the students will start to get used to the common words. And the common words of empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping and testing. We're going to look at these words in a little bit more detail later on. So design thinking is the use of interdependent skills that we've just looked at in a repeatable process that encourages creative problem solving. And this can be repeated in every single subject, every single year group, and, you know, every single curriculum. So this was from Created Edu, Design Thinking. I've given you the hyperlink just there if you'd like to have a look at it more. But what I'd like to underline is how you cannot do design thinking without every single process having the set skills, the STEAM skills that we've like traditionally looked at it as. So what I'd like to highlight is that design thinking is a process where every single stage you need those key skills. So therefore, if you were going to do a design thinking project in maths, like you will be getting these skills at every single process, so they'd be at like, so your students will be able to practice them. So that's why I say every day is a design thinking day. Now, projects, when I say about projects, I don't mean like massive like day-long projects, although those are very good as well, or like week-long projects, maybe like thinking about things like the like a science fair, for instance, like where they do like a project over like a set number of days and they present it at the end. It could be like condensed down into one lesson. You could be as big or as small as you want it to be, which is why it makes it so easy to have design thinking as a process, like in a subject. Incorporated it into classrooms with a daily classroom teacher doing it, as opposed to relying on like the STEAM coordinator doing this on a yearly basis. So I'd like to concentrate on the platforms that would help a daily classroom teacher or a head of department or like a head teacher work out like what's the best platform for your students to use to empathise, to define, to ideate, to prototype or to test. So I've given you some suggestions at each one, and you notice that yes, I am a Microsoft educator, and I'm hoping that people that are Apple and Google haven't already switched off, but like I've tried to make it so that it is as interchangeable as possible. So you notice that at each stage I've given platform suggestions that are not just Microsoft, it's interchangeable from Apple to Google to Microsoft to independent platforms. So I'm hoping that you guys that are not Microsoft schools have not just turned me off, but it's like this is a process that is very equitable and I guess accessible like to any school that wants to try it out. What I've done on the conference notes is that I've made all of these so that they are hyperlinks. So that's why it's coming up with a little hand here. So if you want to skip now to defining or skip to ideating, then if you just click onto like the blue squares at the bottom, then it will let you skip to the ones that you want. And what I've done in the conference notes is I've made little videos on a deep dive onto each of the platforms. So I picked one platform for each one. But what we're going to do for this workshop is we're going to take a look at each of the headings: empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping and testing, just to see what they are first of all. A final thing is that I've also put on the STEAM conference slides how I actually made this PowerPoint as well, because it's using a new type of PowerPoint template from Office 365 called Storyboard, which actually can be used for the ideate bit of design thinking. So it's very useful. So let's have a look. Empathizing. So what does empathise actually mean? Empathise for design thinking means that you're identifying your target audience and what do your target audience need. So you will have a project, or the class teacher will give this their students a project brief. So in that project brief, like the students will then need to identify their target audience in order to creatively problem solve. Okay, how would you do this? I mean, like you could do this by getting them into different focus groups using a Meet Now, and that can be done with Google Hangouts, or it could be done with Zoom, or it could be done with, with Microsoft Teams. And then like with this Meet Now, like you can identify like the project brief, and you can say, well, look, like what do you need out of this? And you can then start collecting ideas from your target audience. So a good way of doing that would be to do breakout rooms, okay, so that your target audience can go into smaller groups and they can start writing down what and collecting, so you can start collecting the all important data. Another way you can also do it is by using forms. Now, I've given you a tutorial on how I would set up a form and how you can guide your students into setting up forms to gauge opinions and to gauge what your target audience wants and doesn't want. And that screenshot is what I'm showing you on the screen just now. So once you have got that data, okay, and you've got that, you've empathized with your audience, you are then going to want to define what your audience needs, and you're also going to want to define what your role is and what each team member, if you're working in a team, needs to do in order to achieve that goal. So let's have a look at defining. So in defining what have I learned about my audience and what does this mean for my team, and what roles are then going to be defined within that team. And the way that you can bring your team together is by using Google Classroom, is by using Teams, or is by using like an independent platform. But you're going to be having a look at data. Okay, so like I've given you a screenshot again of a form that we ran. Okay, and like that form is then going to be, the responses side is then going to be data rich. Okay, and it's going to give you a lot of data about your target audience. And what you're going to need to do in this defining is by using perhaps a sway. And that sways are going to communicate back to your team or back to your target audience. Well, this is what I found out about you. And then what are we going to do in order to answer the questions or like, meet the needs that you have given us? Another way of defining and making sure that your team knows exactly what to do is by using something called Planner. Now, I have gone through in more detail what Planner is, Microsoft Planner, and how there's other things that you can use if you are not Microsoft, called Trello if you're independent, and there is a Google one as well. I think it's called, the name escapes me, but I have said it in the real video. But basically what Planner does is it gives it makes it very transparent on what your team is doing and what the deadlines are for it, so everyone can work to a common goal, which is really useful. So once you have organized your team, you have defined your aim, and you have written down your objectives and your roadmap in order to get to your goal, what your students need to then do is to ideate. And what ideating is curating and collecting ideas. Now, the thing that students like to do is that as soon as you give them a question or as soon as you give them a problem, they immediately go to ideate and they're just like, right, okay, I've got all these ideas, but they might not necessarily be linked to your target audience or to the target audience that you've given them, which then becomes a problem because like they've got all these ideas, but like it doesn't necessarily mean that they've actually solved the problem, or they're creatively thinking to solve the problem, because it might be completely at a disconnect to the target audience. So that's why it's really important to start at the beginning, to identify, to empathize, to define, and then go to ideating. Okay, so what ideating is the collection and curation of ideas. And the screenshot that I've given you is a beautiful Wakelet that I found. A Wakelet is a Microsoft platform, but there's also like, things like Padlet, and Jamboard that you can be using to curate like information at the same place. And the idea is that you're curating it smartly. So you're not just like curating random ideas that look cool, you're actually curating ideas that might get you to your goal. The OneNote collaboration board is also a brilliant way of doing this, and it's a way that means that the teacher can also see what the students are doing as well. So that's what I've made the video on about this particular thing, so to help you make a OneNote collaboration space that will help your students then become a lot more integrated in their ideating stage. If you are not a Microsoft person, then you can also be using things like Padlet. If you give them individual Padlets and they can just like put all their ideas on there and talk to each other on there, then it will work just as well. And of course, Jamboard for the same reason. Once you have collected your ideas, then you're going to be like, or your students are going to then be making prototypes. And the making of prototypes and design thinking is to make as many prototypes as possible to see whether it breaks, to see whether there is a problem with it, and to communicate this constantly back to the target audience or constantly back to your other team members, so that other people can see your ideas, and you can find out what works and find out how to make it better really like rapidly. Okay, so the whole point of a prototype is to show your first idea off. Okay, so like the way that I would guide my students into doing this is by using, well, what I'm using with you at the moment, called PowerPoint storyboards. Okay, so like it's a really lovely way of presenting an idea to like a target audience, whether it be your other team members or whether it be like the audience itself, to see in order to do the 5th stage, which is the test. Okay, so you can use PowerPoint and storyboards. What you can also do is make mock-ups now in Paint 3D. And what Paint 3D does is it makes it so that you are able to, once you have made your mock-up, like prototype, you can then make it into 3D and put it into augmented reality very easily, which means that you can then put it into like real life. You can try and take selfies with it to gauge size, to make it a bit more tangible, to see whether you like it or not. What you can also do if you're looking at the very big, and what our students have done before. So one of the STEAM events that we did Miss Henderson did last year, was to make a roller coaster, and that roller coaster was either going to be made physically or it was going to be made on Minecraft. Now we gave all the students, this was in COVID, like before COVID times, we gave all the students in groups like all these materials and like all these things that they can make their prototype roller coaster on. But what they found actually really useful, because it was making something very abstract, it was very big, was that they just went on Minecraft and they made the Minecraft roller coaster, put it into a theme park, and they can actually see, like, you know, they can see the physics behind how their roller coaster could be made, and they could then therefore justify the finances behind it and so on. So it was a really, really good activity for them. Associated with that is something called MakeCode. MakeCode is free. It is a Microsoft program that it can be seen online, and this is the thing that I've actually made the video on for the prototype bit. It is a very powerful tool that can be used for computer science, but can also be used in like pretty much every other subject if you're making something. Okay, so in design technology, in maths, in kind of in the sciences, or in STEAM days, you could be making code work to your ends in order to creatively problem solve. And I've said, like in the video that I've given you, like, so it gives you like a little tutorial of where to click and like, you know, what you can find on MakeCode. There are many, I think there are 8 different kinds, including Lego, including the one that's Lego, including the very popular microbits that's in the UK. Now, if you don't have these the hardware at school, then you can just do the simulation on the side, which is quite effective. But if you do have the hardware at school, you can actually download your code and you can put it into the hardware, so you can actually see like your code working and whether it actually works in real life, which I think is fantastic for the students. Okay, so once you have done your prototype and you're pretty sure that the prototype works, okay, you're going to be constantly, perhaps these two are going to actually be interchanging, like, you know, you very quickly, this is the great thing about design thinking, actually, you can very quickly go backwards and forwards in it. Okay, so like if you made a prototype, you can quickly test it. If you have like a target audience and your target audience says, well, actually, like that's not quite what we had in mind, like that doesn't really answer the question that we wanted you to answer, you've got to go back to defining. Okay, you go through the process again. But what testing is, so the testing phase is to give it essentially back to the audience. What works, what doesn't work, and Flipgrid is brilliant at this. And again, like, you know, I've got a really good example here about a recent and again here I've got a really good example here about a recent project that Miss Henderson did with our year 9s, year 8s and year 7s about sustainability. And we did year 9 presentation. Well, she did year 9 presentations, and each child presented their project. They put it onto Flipgrid, and we put it in they're putting it in a safe place so that other people can see their project, see what they found out, the data that they collected, and like the prototype that they made. And then they could get feedback on whether, like, and the other year 9s and the other year 8s and the other year 7s could then give feedback on how effective they thought their data collection and project and their kind of solution was, which was a very powerful thing for the students. Authentic real-life student peer assessment is something that's really difficult to get right, especially something very difficult to get right live. What Flipgrid does is it makes it all inclusive and it makes it equitable for everyone, so everyone gets a chance to like be on a platform and say their ideas in a clear and concise manner, because they can make a video about it, they can make, and this is why I put, they can make a sway and present the sway by recording their screen. They can make an Adobe Spark video, they can just like present themselves like this. So therefore, every student will then have a voice. So that's the end of my design thinking. That's the end of my design thinking process, and that's I'm hoping that through this, I know that I've gone a little bit fast, but through this you've got a better idea on what design thinking is and how it can be applied to your subject, and the apps and the platforms that can be used in order to support your design thinking process within your subject. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure giving this workshop to you today. For more information, I really recommend you talking to Miss Laura Henderson, who tweets under Miss L Henderson, and she is the person who coordinates all of our STEAM activities like within our secondary school. So she will be able to give you lots of ideas on how to give and develop STEAM days and STEAM activities for each of your year groups. And also Kathy Karanzowski, who tweets under Kersey, who is the author of Sailing the Seven Seas, which is a book that is all about the Microsoft ecosystem and how the Microsoft ecosystem apps and platforms can be used within a social education environment. It's a very, very interesting book, and it's something that I've gone back to and read many, many times. So that's it. If you have any questions, please do give them to me in any way that you see fit. I'm most active on Twitter.